So today I'm going to talk about navigating media relations and B2B with the help of AI. I'll talk about things that I do, tips and tricks that I have, and would love to hear yours after the session as well. So just a little bit about me. I am a co-founder at Shape and Scale. We are a RevOps and PR consultancy. We focus on B2B SaaS companies. I have a business partner named Pasha Irashad, who's based in DC, who I convinced to start a company with me. But I'm very much on the communications and PR side. I've been in public relations, in tech-focused B2B public relations my entire career. And my main kind of focus area is just communication strategy. I help technology companies usually grow and differentiate. Those are really the two main things that they're looking to do. So I help my clients do that. In terms of services, it's really around communications planning and counsel. I love working with executives on thought leadership. Media relations, of course, is what I'm here to talk to today. That's really the bread and butter of my business. But of course, with that comes interest relations, things like content development, and a little bit of social media guidance, but I hand it over to experts at Leadtail to handle more social media strategy. So with that, let's get into today's topic. So I always love to start presentations by starting at that macro level and then going down into micro. So I thought if we're talking about the media relations maze today, let's first start talking about like what is media relations and why is it, like I said, it was the bread and butter for my business. Why? How did we get here and what does it mean? I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I think it's just important to set the stage. So, perception is reality when we talk about brand awareness for a brand, for any brand, regardless of we're in B2B or B2C or wherever we are. And so media relations and externally, how people are writing about you, how people are thinking about you, it matters a lot. It matters a lot in terms of purchasing power and sales and growth. So when we talk about media relations and working with a professional, a public relations professional to navigate that process, it becomes incredibly valuable. We have company spotlights. We get that external validation of folks writing about you to create positive buzz about the brand. And it's content ultimately. We're still in an era of content is king, right? Probably more than ever with diversified platforms. So content, media relations really fuels content across marketing and PR. It leads to social, of course, blogs, website fodder. It can be really, really powerful. It's also free, right? Media relations is a free process. Working with reporters is free. Of course, you have to employ the service of someone like a public relations professional, but it's a free earned process, which really helps in that validation piece. There's a difference between reading a piece that is about product or about vision from an executive at a company and reading an advertorial. There's a different tone there. So ways that AI can be used in media relations is what I'll get into a little bit today. But when we talk about automation of where the industry is headed, when we think about journalists and publications, research, and then trend capturing as well. A PR person really has to be on top of trends to tell good stories. So research and trend capturing is incredibly important. So just a very quick note on the media landscape. If you're working with a public relations professional at the moment, or you are one, and you're not talking about the changing media landscape, you're probably doing your client a disservice, or your public relations professional is probably doing you a disservice as well. The media landscape is, well, it's just a hot mess. So, I'm sure you all heard that print was quote unquote dying prior to the pandemic. But even since the pandemic, the average newsroom has been cut by 30%. So and we're not seeing a lack of news, right? We're not seeing less innovation happening, especially in B2B. So we're seeing reporters that are covering more with less time. I've listed here just a couple of the publications that have had layoffs this year alone. So what that means for public relations professionals and just media relations in general is the reporters are changing constantly. They are harder to reach. And they are consolidating tech coverage more than ever before. So they may not have time to cover certain trends. They may not have time to cover certain topics like momentum, for example, momentum announcements. Like they're really interested in hard news and what's newsworthy. So with that, let's talk about 5 tips to cut through the noise, cut through this mess of a landscape that I just talked about. So tip number 1 is relationships don't matter anymore, or they matter very little. This is controversial, guys. This not every PR person may agree with, but this is my experience. So when I say relationships don't matter anymore, what I'm saying is the emphasis is truly on the story, the quality of the narrative that the reporter is getting from a PR professional, outside of those major tech giants that they're covering every single day, the emphasis on the story, the quality of it, that's where they're going to cover. That's what they're going to write about. So perhaps prior to the pandemic, even like much earlier in my career, this industry was really relationship driven, where it was very important to have relationships with reporters. That was a huge part of whether you could get clients if you're a PR agency, or whether you could get a job at a PR agency. Like, what kind of relationships do you bring to the table? And now I think the name in a reporter's inbox matters even less. It's the quality of the narrative that they're getting. So what is a good story, right? When we think about how do we reach these people with a good quality narrative, what exactly does that mean? And we're talking about newsworthy items. So newsworthy items are things that are unexpected, things that are happening now. If you can give a reporter an exclusive or something under embargo, something that's not live yet, but intends to be, something that their competitive publication, like for example, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, their competitors, if New York Times gets a piece of information before Wall Street Journal has it, that's very powerful for them. It's all about clicks, it's all about views. So the more newsworthy an item is, the more likely it is that you'll get covered. And macro tech trends. So there's really an emphasis on, if you are working for a very technical product or technical offering, how can you up level that technical piece and talk about more of a macro trend of the industry, tell the story at that macro level that's way more important than ever before. So this is a massive transition for public relations folks. Like, of course, relationships are still important and they help get your email answered, but that doesn't mean that the story is going to get told if you know the reporter. So tip 2 is slow down and personalize. This is probably the most painful tip for a busy PR pro. When I was coming up in my own career, it was the email blast was a thing, right? Like the day of an announcement, you send out a massive list to like 300 folks. That is just no longer the name of the game today. You have to find the right reporter at the right publication. You have to know who's reading that publication, what the target personas are, and for the reporter, what do they cover? As I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it is literally changing constantly. Where reporters are going, who's been laid off, what beat they're covering changes almost weekly. So that means you really do have the time. Like, a media list that you may have developed with a list of reporters a month ago may no longer be relevant today. So that's a massive change. So you have to personalize the pitch. Why is it important to the journalist readers? You have to really indicate that very, very clearly. This is why your readers will find this important. This is where the story is. AI can be very, very helpful for batch researching. So whether you use Claude or ChatGPT, I experiment with all of them personally and happy to have that discussion, but it can be really helpful for batch research. So like something like tell me about Cade Metz and what he likes to cover. It won't have all of the most up-to-date information, but it will be able to source a lot of his content. He's a New York Times reporter, for those who aren't familiar. This type of batch researching with these tools cannot replace personalization and telling a good story, but it can help you give like that macro glance of like what this reporter writes about, what he may be interested in. Tip number 3 is contributed content. Contributed content specifically goes like hotcakes. So when I'm talking about contributed content, this is thought leadership. I'm talking about placed articles. They're also called bylines, placed articles with a publication. Not every single publication accepts free earned content, so you have to know which editors to go to, which publications to go to. But this, hands down, is the easiest way to place my clients right now. Because of this editorial shortage, editors are short-staffed and they need content for their site. So getting free content is key. But there are a couple of things that we need to remember. It has to be thought leadership driven. So we can't talk about product, no promotional hubbub, right? This is about visionary stories from your executive team, thought leadership, like talking about the way the industries are changing, pain points, those kinds of things. There, with the right public relations professional, there is a way to tie back these thought leadership pieces, these bylines, to the value proposition of the company. So that's a conversation I have with some of my clients, is like, well, why am I doing this? It doesn't even talk about product, yada, yada. Very comfortable with that conversation, but it's really like, we can talk about value prop, we can talk about pain points, we can still address your key personas. So it's free, which is wonderful. The biggest challenge to this tip is content creation. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth at some organizations with content. Either writing the content or getting it approved can be really difficult and time consuming. So I just think that's worth noting here. The clients right now that I get the most coverage for either have content support or they work with me on content and they approve it quickly. Tip number 4. So where can AI assist? Specifically, the way that I think about it is AI is not doing my job for me, but it's like it's an assistance. So as I had mentioned previously, keeping up with media lists these days is debatably a full-time job. I mean, prior to the pandemic, you can complete a media list with targeted reporters, and that could be updated 2 to 3 times a year. Like, reporters just didn't shift the way that they do now. But now a media list does require an update every single time you need it. So a couple of my personal tips for keeping track of media, both AI and manually, something like Muckrack or Cision, like these media databases that you need a subscription for, they do have alerts. So like, you can create a media list within that platform, or you can just tag specific reporters and they will alert you when there's a change. Something like Muckrack gives you like every week, like I think it's every Monday, they send me an email with every reporter that's shifted like across the industry, and it's a massive email every week. Networking groups are a great way to do this. So I'm personally belong to TCN. Ask me about TCN if you don't know about it, but it's called the Communications Network. It's a Slack networking group, and there's a specific channel there with just reporter moves. So I think either whether you're internal to an agency or a group and you want to keep track of reporters leaving, like the more you can flag it, I think the better, just to help others. Twitter also allows you to do lists. So I have lists with all of the reporters, like my kind of top 10 to 15 reporters for every client. I keep lists of those. And so I can see, usually they update their Twitter, I'm sorry, X, old habits, die hard. They update their handles if they move somewhere. So that can be helpful as well. And then for those that aren't familiar with Sam Whitmore, he's an analyst of the media. So please ask me about Sam Whitmore if you don't know about him, but he has a service called Media Survey. It's very affordable and he tracks movements as well. He sends newsletters, like I think every other week. He interviews reporters talking about what it's like to work with PR professionals. So you get an inside scoop of what reporters are looking for from that angle as well. His content is wonderful. So what I'm pointing to is like, you just don't have to track reporters alone by yourself in your office, right? It's like there are tools that are automation tools. There are analysts that are there to help you. And then there are groups I think that you can belong to as well, of course, depending on your industry, and the reporters that are interesting to you. So to conclude, it's not just you. Earned media is harder than ever before. There are less reporters than there were ever before. It's very, very hard. Relationships aren't as important as they used to be, but it is still a PR pro's job to guide you to the right reporter, to tell the right story, to go to the right publication, and to guide you on the right time too. Because it can't always be the right time to tell a story on a major holiday or on a major banking holiday or after a major other piece of news has hit. That's the PR person's job to still guide you in this way. There's still a lot of traditional elements of public relations that are still very important today. So just because the industry is shifting doesn't mean that PR people are just kind of like lost and don't know what to do. There are still best practices that they can employ. So if you want to chat more after today, I'm really looking forward to the discussion, but my email is here, my LinkedIn, please connect with me. I would love to talk more.